John Oler, my good friend from Sharon. Where's John? This whole thing was John's idea when we met at the GOP convention in May. John said, why don't we do a town hall for Ryan? And so that's exactly what we're doing. I want to thank people from Ryan's campaign, particularly Pam Solomon, Chris Michelli, and Chris Zeller, Colleen Michelli, and Chris Zeller for their help in arranging this. And a special thanks to Lynn Harrington, who is chair of the Kent RTC, for getting us this space. Now there's an interesting story here. When we announced this several weeks ago, and when Lynn entered this on the books of the town hall in Kent, the event was going to be at the Kent Town Hall. On Tuesday, the Democratic Town Committee in Kent decided that we shouldn't have a town hall in their town hall. And so they began putting pressure on the Kent First Selectmen to disallow us to use town hall. And they were threatening to have a demonstration, to have pickets, and to try to disrupt the event. And not surprisingly, the First Selectman didn't want to have that kind of a mess on his hands. So he announced on Tuesday that town hall would be unavailable, but he did graciously arrange for us to be in the space, for which we thank him. I must say that this display of a lack of collegiality and a lack of tolerance for opposing point of views is distressing to see. We've seen this on the national scene for decades. I have frankly hoped that at the state level, and the local level, we would be immune from that, but it appears that we're not. And we have the same issue here that is going on around the country, and frankly is unhealthy for our democracy. So, a word about the format. The original plan was I was going to introduce our state. I'm sorry?
Speak a little louder. Yeah. Do your best.
Initially, we were going to have Steve Harding, our 30th District State Senator, introduce Ryan. Steve worked with Ryan in the Senate for the last 2 terms. Steve had an event involving his son tonight that he had to cancel, and he said, Tom, why don't you introduce Ryan? I thought, you're going to be tired of listening to me, so Matt Corey, our candidate for Lieutenant Governor, will do the introduction. After Matt introduces Ryan, Ryan will make an opening statement, following which I will pretend to be a newspaperman, and I will be asking Ryan a series of questions. The questions have not been rehearsed. Ryan has no idea what I'm going to ask. I have no idea what he's going to say, but I think we will manage to muddle through. After I finish those questions, we'll then open it up to 5 or 6 questions from the floor. No speeches, just short questions. And hopefully we can wrap this up by 6:15, by 7:15 or 7:30. So, Matt Corey, you probably all know him. He's perennial in Republican politics. And when he announced he was running for Lieutenant Governor about a year ago, and Matt's been crisscrossing the state, I was personally excited because Matt has some really interesting ideas about what he could do with the Lieutenant Governor's position. So we are lucky to have Matt Corey with us. Matt Corey.
Thank you, Kent, and surrounding RTCs. It's great to be up here. It's a beautiful part of our state. And we took a lot of tour today of the surrounding areas. It's just picturesque, and I hope it stays that way for the next generation. I hadn't had the pleasure of working in the state senate with Senator Fazio, but I can tell you I admire his work. Anybody that's ever watched him on the floor and articulate the issues, it's amazing. I got to know this man just traveling the state with him as we were going to RTCs all around the state of Connecticut. But I got to really know the guy, just campaigning with him within the last few weeks. I'm just so excited to hear more about his vision for the state of Connecticut. I couldn't be more excited to help him become our next governor of the state of Connecticut. I'm sure you're going to listen to all his great things that he has and great ideas. I don't need to mention them because he's going to talk about them tonight. But coming from a guy that's ran a couple statewide races, knowing the issues that face Connecticut, knowing the struggles a lot of small businesses and families are facing here in the state of Connecticut, I couldn't be more excited to work for someone other than Senator Fazio in this race. So if that's coming from me, guys, listen, I'm so excited to help him out, get over the top, and bring Connecticut to where it should be, and not looking at what it used to be, and where it can be. So thank you so much for having me. My honor, I'm going to introduce Senator Ryan Fazio, our next governor of the state of Connecticut.
Very kind introduction. I find myself very fortunate to be running alongside a man who has dedicated himself in uniform, in service of this country, who has been a small business owner and is now giving back in the political space. We don't arrange these things of who we end up running with. That's the way it works, but I'm very fortunate to be running alongside him and so many great candidates across our state, especially your state senator, Steve Harding, who's a close friend and really a great champion for the 30th district and all of Connecticut. Thank you to Tom and Lynn and everybody in the RTCs in the region in the 30th district for organizing tonight, and thank you all for coming out. No matter what town you're from, no matter your political affiliation, we all care about our community and our state. And we want to solve the problems for the next generation that transcend party lines. There is no Democrat or Republican in this state, I believe, who wants to be paying the third highest taxes in the country. There is no Democrat or Republican from anywhere in this state, I believe, who wants to be paying the second highest utility bills. But also, I think there is not a Democrat, Republican, unaffiliated, or independent in this state who does not love Connecticut, love the people, love the communities. This is a great state. It's no more evident to me than today when I'm driving all across Litchfield County and my phone isn't ringing off the hook because I don't have reception. So it means I get to look out the window at this beautiful county, this beautiful inheritance we have as Connecticut residents. And it's an important reminder. It was a day of reflection and perspective for me. There is so much we have to be thankful for, but there is so much work we have to do to protect this great inheritance for the next generation. And that's what this campaign is all about. We are so fortunate as Connecticut residents to live in a great state with good people and all the attributes necessary to succeed fantastically beyond all of our wildest dreams. And yet, as I go around the state and talk to people from every station in life, from every political affiliation, people are hurting. They're struggling in a state with the third highest taxes in the country, the second highest electric bills, and the fourth weakest rate of economic growth. And for the life of me, I believe we can do better. I believe that this state should expect nothing but the best from its state government and its state policy. I believe that Connecticut could and should succeed like no other place on earth, and it can with a positive change in direction. And that's why I'm running for governor. I was born and raised in this state. This is the only place I've ever called home and I ever will call home. My fiance, Amy, and I will start a family here, make a life here, because it's our home and we care about it. But it's become far too difficult for people, no matter their background, to put down roots here, to get a job here, to afford to pay their bills here, to retire here. And something needs to be done about it. The old adage, what happens, what do you say, when you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It's not wise, we'll put it that way. But this election presents a turning point for our state. It gives us an opportunity to change direction. After 8 years of one governor, we now have the most expensive state in the entire continental US. And this gives us an opportunity to alter our direction and change trajectory for the future of our state. So I want to talk about those key issues that I hear about from everybody all across our state that I think are unique to our state and challenges that need to be solved by the next governor because they have not been solved by this one. First, we all know Connecticut faces the third highest tax burden in the entire country. And over the last 8 years, this governor and the state government have raised that burden by hundreds of millions of dollars more. They've raised sales taxes, imposed a new prepared meals tax. They've raised your payroll taxes by hundreds of millions of dollars. They've raised taxes on small businesses, on nursing homes, on hospitals. If it moves, they've taxed it. But not only that, they have imposed so many new costs on our towns and cities that they've also presided over a state where property taxes keep going up by 5%, 6%, 7% year over year in most towns and cities across the state. And that's a regressive tax. It hurts working families and it hurts seniors on a fixed income most of all. That's because of the failure of leadership. We have a spending problem in Hartford. We continue to dictate more and more to our towns and cities without any relief. But that can be changed. This campaign, I'll be proposing and running on the largest middle-class tax cut in state history that will save the average family in our state thousands of dollars in my first term and hopefully more into the future. We can accomplish that. Now, anyone who's running for office and who makes promises should be forced to explain how they're going to meet them, right? We can do it in 3 key ways. We can pay for a roughly $2 billion tax cut, the largest in state history for the middle class. First, we need to ensure that our state is tightening its belt and limiting the growth in general government spending year after year, just around the rate of inflation. That's reasonable. Unfortunately, under this governor, we just passed a state budget that increases government spending by 8% year over year. 8% year over year. We're going to pay for that. There's no two ways around it. You can repeal any law you want in the state government, but you can't repeal the laws of mathematics or economics or accounting. And so we're going to pay for that. Not only that, we continue to add more and more debt. So if we create general government policies that have actually worked in the past in Connecticut, that limit spending growth generally for the state government in the general fund at around the rate of inflation, but also limit debt issuance so politicians in office cannot kind of kick the can of costs down the road when they cut a ribbon with presenting a big check to some organization for some project, then we'll significantly by itself give ourselves hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue to provide tax relief. But there's more we can do. There's hundreds of millions, maybe $1 billion per year of excessive spending, of waste in our state government that needs to be prioritized, cut, limited. This governor in his first term gave $1 million to a consulting firm, a very famous international consulting firm, to create a report called the Creates Report that found waste and inefficiencies in state government. And they came back and they returned a report that said there's $600 to $900 million of excess spending that we found that could pretty easily be reduced without diminishing services. These were just inefficiencies in government, different bureaucracies or administrations, where responsibility could be combined or shifted and so on. Pretty mundane stuff, but a real substantial possibility for taxpayer relief. Well, that report has been doing nothing but gathering cobwebs. over the last 6 years under this governor's watch. There's other areas, excessive hiring in certain departments and so on, that could provide us more room to provide relief. And also, we need to simplify the tax code, which has billions of dollars of special interest, deductions and credits in the tax code that benefit politically well-connected industries and corporations, but are paid for by middle-class families and small businesses who don't have a lobbyist or an activist on their behalf in Hartford like those big corporations do. So there's hundreds of millions, maybe $1 billion of simplicity of revenue there. Altogether, we could provide $2 billion of middle-class tax relief, saving the average family thousands of dollars in my first term. That not only will make the state more affordable, but will allow the state's economy to grow at long last. That's first, the largest middle-class tax cut in state history. It can be done. Second, there is not a single place I think I can go in this state without hearing about our electric bills. And it makes sense. So your electric bill should not have to feel like a second mortgage on your home just to keep the lights on, or the AC going, or the heat going. Connecticut has the second highest electric bills in the entire country, after only Hawaii, which is detached from the mainland, and ahead of even California, which is detached from reality. So we don't have an excuse. But it's not just because it has to be that way. It's not just because of our geography. It's not just because of external factors. The fault is in ourselves. It's in our state policy. And this governor has exacerbated it. This governor has raised hidden taxes in our electric bill, including in the public benefits charge and the supply charge of your bill, that are used to fund discretionary government programs that do not necessarily deliver electricity to your homes. For instance, just this year, against our objections, Steve and my and other state legislators' objections, this governor signed House Bill 5340 into law, which will increase the public benefits charge in your electric bill by billions of dollars over the next 30 years. To do what? To provide subsidies to private energy corporations that produce electricity. I want those companies to be able to succeed. I want them to compete, but I want them to drive down costs and stand on their own 2 feet. The idea, roughly half the hidden taxes in our electric bill, there's over about $1 billion if I were to estimate. It changes year to year because of some of the technicalities, but there's over 50 different government programs that are funded through a hidden tax in your public benefits charge and in your supply charge, about half of which is used to subsidize private energy companies in what they do. There is another 25% of that, roughly, is basically to fund different social programs that would traditionally be funded through the state budget. And another 20% or 25% is different government programs, energy kind of conservation programs and bureaucracies that have some validity, but need to be kept in check, not grow out of control. Those costs are highly unique and unusual to Connecticut, and this governor has raised them by about $100 to $200 million per year. So billions of dollars over his entirety of the 2 terms and into the future. As governor, I'll end the public benefits charge and every other hidden tax in our electric bill. We can end many of those programs immediately. We could provide hundreds of millions of dollars of relief to electric bill ratepayers almost immediately in this state. We can sunset many of the other programs over the next 5 years. And then for a few of the programs, like energy efficiency programs, we need to make sure they're right sized, they're efficient, they're providing good cost benefit to the public, reducing demand. I like demand response, for instance, which would pay people to reduce their consumption, especially commercial and industrial customers, on really hot days and really cold days when the grid is stressed. But those are discretionary government programs, and they could be funded like any other discretionary government program through the state budget process, where every 2 years it has to be justified, it has to prove to the legislature that it's doing its job. It can't just continue to grow out of control. It is wrong for a private energy company to be receiving subsidized profits on the backs of retirees or working class families who are paying too much already. That's the difference between my energy plan and this governor's record. And And the third major issue I hear about, especially in so many of our historic towns and neighborhoods, whether it's in southwestern Connecticut or northwestern Connecticut or anywhere else, is this great tradition in Connecticut of local control and home rule. This is a state that well before America's independence was grounded in localism, in home rule, in the old Congregationalist style town hall, where government decisions were made by local citizens about local issues because they understood that the government that governs closest to the people governs best. But yet, today, this governor and this state government continue to impose more and more of their will through unfunded mandates, through dictates over zoning and housing and development decisions on our towns and cities, in spite of their objections. Now, there is no issue where I have made common cause more with some of my more moderate Democratic colleagues in the state legislature. But the majorities are so great, and this governor has taken the strong position that the state needs to dictate more housing and zoning and other decisions on our towns and cities. And that's just not right. I did an interview this morning, I did a forum this morning with a group focused on housing, and I'll tell you, I think we need to have more housing. I think we need to have more housing affordability, and we need to have more housing availability. But we can do that while respecting local control of decision making from our towns and cities. Because our towns and cities know the local circumstances, the resources, the infrastructure, and the historic nature of their neighborhoods. This governor supports the state law 830G, which allows developers to come in and build anything with total disregard for local zoning, as long as 30% of the units in their development are deed restricted. And that gives them the incentive to build really big, even in single family neighborhoods. In Simsbury, you read in the news that there's a 600 unit development in an otherwise small neighborhood. In my district, there is now 100 unit development going up in a single family zone neighborhood. This is coming from someone who has sometimes voted with Democrats and against most Republicans on some housing issues, because I think we need to create a little more housing in this state. I think we need a little bit more housing availability. But developers and the state government, bureaucrats and politicians and the governor should not be constantly overriding the will of local citizens who understand their town or city best. There is no justification for trying to turn Kent, Connecticut into Kansas City. There is no justification for turning Salisbury into South Beach. We can protect what we've been given while also making the state more affordable and helping our economy grow. So what would I do? Again, I'm not here just to cast stones. I would repeal or replace 830G and the governor's historic Omnibus Housing Bill 8002 with something that provided enormous relief to 830G, but also made it easier to create the small-scale housing that we need, but that communities prefer, like accessory dwelling units, like residential units in mixed-use neighborhoods. We need a property tax cap in this state that reduces the unfunded mandates, but also limits the property tax burden. There are over 1,400 unfunded mandates in this state that are imposed on our towns and cities. No one ever takes account of it. No one ever says, we're gonna right-size this. It's about time we did. All it takes is leadership. And that's what I wanna end on before we get to the Q&A. This state could flourish like none other. It should be the easiest job in the world to govern Connecticut. You have the third most educated workforce in the country. Natural beauty, great location, and most importantly, good people who care about their communities, who are proud of their town and city, who are invested. And yet Connecticut is struggling. And the only answer I can come up with as to why is the failures of state leadership and state policy. But with a positive change, I know Connecticut can succeed like no other place in this country, like no other place on earth. That we can create jobs and affordability and opportunity for all and make the future brighter than ever before. So thank you for having me. Thank you for your consideration.
So Ryan, do you mind if we call you Ryan? You're
Yes.
the same age as my youngest son, calling you Mr. Fazio.
That's not right. That's just not right. I've been called a lot worse than Ryan.
So you got into politics at a very young age, and you're frankly running for governor at a fairly young age. What caused you to make the jump so quickly into the political arena?
I spent, 9-10 years working in the agriculture sector and the renewable energy sector down in Stamford and Wilton, Connecticut. I loved the career that I was in. I learned a lot, and I was passionate about it. And I was certainly making, better money than when I was going into government. But I just, something was stuck in my gut that I did not think the direction of this state was right. That we'd continue to raise costs on people, and I was passionate and thought that I could make a difference. And if you want a job done better, you could do it yourself. You should try to do it yourself. And the one thing I'll say to younger people in the audience is that you can make a difference if you start locally. Right? I kind of grew up with the millennial generation who were all told to change the world. How about changing and improving and protecting your own neighborhood, your own town, your own county, and so on? You can make such an enormous difference even as a young person, no matter your station in life, by starting locally, by focusing on your community. And so I ran for the state senate in 2020, mostly to tackle economic issues in the state, and have served 5.5 years in representing my home district, which has been such a great honor that I'm so proud of. But after 5 years, despite all the progress that I feel like we've been able to make, I've been able to make reaching across the aisle and finding some common ground on issues like local control and utilities regulation. I still look at the state and it's being left behind by too much state policy, too much unaffordability. And again, I once again found myself in a position that I love this state, and if I think I want a job done better, then I should do it myself. And so I ran for governor, and I've been truly honored to receive the nomination of my party to do so, and now we're trying to bring people together to make a change for everybody.
So I suspect that everybody in this room applauds your plan to lower taxes and electricity rates. And your ideas seem to me very straightforward and sound. The question is, if the Democrats control the legislature in Hartford, how can you do that without Democratic support?
Great question. And it's a question that anyone, especially who's a Republican, should ask and answer themselves before they run for this office, because it's not worth winning an office, especially this office, just to call yourself whatever title it is, pat yourself on the back and call it a day. It's only worthwhile if you can get the job done. That's the only thing you should really be proud of in the end. And I know this job can get done because, first and foremost, I've spent 5 years in the legislature, and I'm really proud and glad at the relationships I've built across the aisle. My colleagues and I, debate, we argue, but it's always, for me, about policy. And I find it interesting when people disagree. I like to know why someone comes from a different vantage point than anyone else. I like philosophical competition and competitions of ideas. But because I kind of like to understand why people who disagree with me believe what they believe, I think I also spend more time trying to understand everything they do believe. And guess what? None of us agree 100%, and none of us disagree 100%. You can always find common ground. And that's why the pretense of our campaign is the issues that I think the vast majority of residents, regardless of party, agree on. Like that the taxes are too damn high, and so are the utility bills. And in the course of my 5 years in the legislature, even though I've been in a small minority as a Republican, I've co-authored and passed 7 new laws in that period of time, including strengthening oversight of Eversource, including giving towns and cities back the ability to change planning and zoning rules in their town or city charter process, including changing regulations to giving individuals without a college degree more opportunity to get state jobs, including expanding access to health care in the state. So I know that there is common ground that could be found with leadership that's focused on issues. Second point, which is less poetic and more prose, is that there's a line item veto for the governor in this state. And that's good from a fiscal conservative standpoint, from a tax cutting standpoint, because it means that the governor, by him or herself, could veto any line item of spending in the state budget. It's even more important because it gives you leverage. And if you know how to use it in negotiating, then you can get a lot done. So I'm really confident that if we finally have a governor focused on issues everyone cares about, can work with legislators across the aisle and use the leverage that he has, that we can get all of those things done. I will not promise anything that I do not think is realistic. Sometimes I get calls, you need to go big, you need to promise this. I won't promise you the moon and the stars. I will promise you things I know can get done and need to get done. And I think that's what people are looking for.
So at the state convention, when you accepted the unanimous acclamation of your nomination, you made your 3 points, second highest electric rates in the country, third highest tax rates. You also mentioned that Connecticut had the fourth weakest economy. Could you talk about that? What exactly, how do you measure the weakness of our economy and what we can do about it?
Yeah, so the specific reference and every single statistic or measure that I'll make, I can reference the source, so you can test me. And I think that's important to be kind of fact-based as a candidate for office or someone in office. Connecticut has the fourth lowest rate of economic growth from 2018, the year this governor was elected, to 2025, the last year where we have complete data. Those are the facts, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Government statistics, every state's economy, anyone can look it up. And that's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. We should not have the fourth weakest economy when we have the third most educated workforce and one of the most desirable places to live. There is an opportunity for growth here. I think we just need the right amount of change.
So let's turn to education. What are your thoughts on funding and improving education?
That's a very important question, one that's very close to my heart. I spent 7 years volunteering as a tutor in inner city schools, and I saw firsthand how even for students or schools with difficult circumstances that lack resources, kids can succeed and can succeed more than any kid in any place, regardless of how muddy resources they have. You only need the right leadership. You need the right instruction and pedagogy in addition to resources. Now, in Connecticut, where do we stand? Well, over the last 15 years, test scores and student achievement have declined in Connecticut before even COVID happened. That's just not acceptable. That's especially unacceptable in a state where I think we spend the third or fourth or fifth most per capita in taxpayer spending on our schools. There needs to be accountability and there needs to be leadership. And I do think we need to have a renewed policy debate and focus in this state on a statewide level about educational outcomes. It is not acceptable when 30 or 40% of 8th graders can do math at grade level. It is not acceptable when 30 or 40% of 3rd graders or 4th graders know how to read and write on grade level, when that is the age that students need to be able to start reading effectively and communicating effectively, because that is going to change the trajectory of their entire career and their entire life. And we have all the resources in the world necessary to provide the best public education of any state in the country, and that should be our standard. In the 1990s, Massachusetts undertook a major and historic education reform. Similar state to us, they spent a good amount of money already on their schools, but they were just above average in their outcomes, which is kind of how we are now. After 10 years of undertaking that education reform plan, Republican governor, Democratic legislature, Massachusetts was the only state in the entire country to ever be first place in reading and math for 8th graders and 3rd graders in the entire country. And what they did is the exact same thing we see in schools like the one that I tutored at in the Bronx, like schools, inner city schools that have achieved greater things than most suburban schools anywhere in the country, places like Houston, places like Stamford, Connecticut, with the Stamford Charter School for Excellence, that caters to 75% free and reduced lunch student body, 98% non-white student body. It's a few things. High standards, high standards. You got to expect, when you expect a lot, you'll get a lot. And we shouldn't have this soft bigotry of low expectations where we don't expect that our own kids can achieve. Anyone can achieve. And we should expect that and set that standard for everyone to achieve. That's first and foremost. High standards and a rigorous core curriculum focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic, the basics. We have to get back to that. Second, we need feedback. The students need feedback to know the progress they're making, what they need to improve on, and the teachers need feedback to get that too. So you need data, you need a principal and administration that is focused on assessing and delivering feedback for where the improvement needs to happen, what's going well, what isn't going well. Third, you need more instruction time. There are things that we probably undervalue in our society when it comes to education, like there's probably not enough recess, for instance, but most of the time, most of our most precious resource, which is time, should be spent in the classroom focused on that rigorous core curriculum. And there's a few other reforms that are basically proven highly effective, but it's not more than 5 or 6 concepts that, if deployed, whether it's in any inner city or any wealthy suburb, can ensure that any kid can succeed. They can graduate high school being able to do math, being able to read, being able to write, and they are set up for not only success in the workforce, but for good citizenship. Connecticut should expect its schools to be number 1, the best in the entire country. That's the standard I want to set as governor.
I hesitate to ask a question that gets a little bit into national politics, but I know a lot of people in the room are concerned about this. Governor Lamont has repeatedly said Connecticut is not a sanctuary state, and yet we know that there's a directive that local law enforcement should not cooperate with federal law enforcement. I spent my career as a lawyer, and there's a legal doctrine that refers to this. It's called nullification. Can a state nullify federal law within the state? That issue, believe it or not, was decided during the presidency of Andrew Jackson back in the early 19th century. The issue then had to do with tariffs. And the Supreme Court said, no, states aren't free to ignore federal law on tariffs. You saw it again most vigorously during the Civil Rights era, when southern states tried to close their schools and public accommodations in contravention of federal law. And of course, again, the courts ruled time and time again they can't do that. Various presidents sent troops into local schools to enforce federal law. So if you won this election, what, if anything, would you do to deal with the question of Connecticut local officials cooperating with federal law enforcement?
Yeah, as a Connecticut guy, I'm always on the side of Jim Calhoun and not John C. Calhoun. I got no laughs for that. That's unbelievable.
You don't know who Jim Calhoun.
Jim Calhoun's the basketball player. John Calhoun is the Southern senator from the antebellum times from South Carolina. Never mind. It doesn't matter. It wasn't funny. I admit it. It wasn't funny. Okay, I admit it. I missed it. So listen. Yes, the question had national implications, but I always want to take it back to Connecticut because I'm running to be the head of government in Connecticut. We have such important issues that we have to solve here, and in order to do that, we're going to have to bring people together and find common ground. Now, I think having state law like the Trust Act that this governor supports which bans state and local law enforcement from communicating with federal authorities in the case of individuals who are arrested and convicted of Class C, D, and E felonies. That includes things like manslaughter, sexual abuse, stealing a firearm, is totally unacceptable. And what does that look like in practice? What does the governor support for the Trust Act, the Sanctuary Trust Act in 2019 look like in practice? Well, in my neck of the woods in Stamford, Connecticut, a man named Edgar Gomez a few years ago was arrested for assaulting his son, a 2-year-old named Liam, breaking his arm, and was sent to prison for that. When his prison sentence ended, instead of being transferred to federal authorities to be deported because he was not in the country illegally, contrary to his son who was an American citizen, he was let out on the streets, and just months later, he beat and killed his 2-year-old boy, Liam. Liam would still be alive today if not for that law that the governor supported. I believe that legal immigration is good and necessary in our country and our state, but I believe that we need laws that are enforced to protect the public safety and the interests of our community and our nation. And I think that is a common sense, middle of the road position. This governor's taken the position that we're willing to prioritize the interests of even violent criminals over the public safety, and that's wrong, and I'll end it as governor.
Slightly less controversial national issue. Do you think Governor Lamont should have had Connecticut participate in the Great National State Fair?
Yes, I do. Listen, we are so lucky to live in this country, and I think on the 250th birthday, we should do everything we can to celebrate it. And, you know, I get that there's political differences at the national level, but I do think that Connecticut and this governor should have participated in this state fair. You know, my family went down. I was campaigning and celebrating up here, but they said that it was, you know, it was a positive choice. It wasn't a partisan occasion. And I think sending representation, Democrat and Republican, would be better for our 250th, right? Because it shows we all have love of country. This is not about party. This is about all of us. This is about the great inheritance that we have as Americans and Connecticut citizens. And I think participating as a state in that would have helped go in a positive direction. So I'm regretful that the governor didn't participate.
So Ryan, what would you do on your first day of office? Or your first week if you want to?
First day, listen, there's a lot we can do. I think there's a lot of wasteful spending that's hurting taxpayers and making the state unaffordable that you could veto on a line item basis pretty quickly. There are state regulations that the governor could take the leadership role in changing, opting into the federal tax credit for education that would give low-income students access to thousands of dollars more each to support their education, whether it's a kid in a public school in Bridgeport getting tutoring services, or a kid from Waterbury going to a parochial school getting a scholarship. I think that would be something that could be done in the first hour of my governorship that I would pledge to do. And there are other, I think, policy changes on the energy space that could probably be done by executive order, legally of course, before we pass our giant energy reform package later in my first year. So there are, I think, on issues like education, on responsible budgeting, trying to reduce waste in government, and energy costs that we can start tackling problems on day one.
We'll get to audience questions in just a moment. I have one last question, Ryan. I hate to make the last question a downer, but the latest poll that I'm familiar with, the University of New Hampshire Nutmeg poll, shows Lamont's support at 49% and yours at 36%. Do you believe those numbers, and do you believe you can overcome that gap?
Yeah, so the New Hampshire survey was not a poll, so it's a panel, so it's a survey and it's not statistically representative of the general public. So I'm certainly not concerned about it. We poll internally. I know the other campaigns poll internally. The polling internally is better than I hoped it would be even a couple months ago. But I think the only important things with the public polling are twofold. First, the governor, who's been in office for 8 years and has spent almost unlimited money on his campaigns, is below 50%. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone has an opinion on the job he's done. And he's still below 50%. That's not very good. Second, not a lot of people know me yet. I think my name recognition is 50%. And a lot of those people are like, I just heard. So it's my responsibility and my campaign's responsibility to introduce ourselves and represent ourselves well. And so if I'm gonna win this, I'm gonna earn it. There's no two ways about it. So I have a lot of work to do crisscrossing the state, and I promise to carry myself the exact same way I've done on all my Senate campaigns. Work as hard as anybody, focus on the issues, and try to bring people together. And I think that's a winning formula. This is a win.